Sienna's hand froze on the doorknob the moment she heard the pounding. Heavy, rushed, like someone trying to break the morning open. She pulled the door halfway, and her breath snapped tight as she saw Lena standing there, eyes blazing, a stack of legal papers pressed so hard against her chest they bent at the corners. Rain clung to Lena's hair, dripping down her perfect face, but her smile was wrong. Sharp, triumphant, trembling with something dark. Eli peeked from behind Sienna's leg, his small fingers digging into her jeans as if he sensed danger before she could voice it. The air between the sisters filled with a strange heat, an old wound ripping open without warning. Then Lena lifted the papers slowly, letting them hover like a blade aimed at Sienna's world. In the second Sienna read the words, "temporary custody." Her knees buckled because it felt like Lena wasn't just taking her child. She was taking the last piece of her life she still trusted. But the most frightening part was Lena's silence. Sienna slammed the door before Lena could push it wider. Her heart hammering so hard echoed in her ears. Eli clung to her, asking what was happening, but her voice refused to come. The hallway felt smaller, closing in as she stared at the papers shaking in her hands. She read the lines again and again, hoping the words would change, hoping there was some mistake. But the threat sat heavy and real. Behind the door, Lena's footsteps scratched across the porch, like she wanted to root herself there forever. Sienna's breath turned sharp as memories of their childhood flashed. Lena's envy, her biting words, the way she always tried to take whatever Sienna had. Only this time, she wasn't taking a toy or a secret. She was reaching straight for Sienna's whole life. And as Eli whispered, "Mom," in a trembling voice, Sienna swore she wouldn't let Lena steal him. Not through lies, not through fear, not through anything. Sienna guided Eli into the living room, trying to hide the quake in her breath, but he watched her too closely, reading every twitch. She placed the papers on the coffee table as if they might explode, and for a moment, she simply stared at them, afraid to touch them again. Eli whispered whether Aunt Lena was mad at them, and Sienna felt her throat tighten because the truth was too ugly to speak. Instead, she held him, feeling his small arms wrap around her waist, grounding her in the chaos. Outside, Lena's car engine roared to life, then faded down the street. But the silence she left behind cut deeper. Sienna knew Lena wasn't done. This was only the opening blow. The house felt colder, the walls thinner, the danger closer. She wiped her eyes, forced her voice steady, and told Eli they were safe, even though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. Sienna finally stepped away from Eli and picked up her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed Mark's number. She prayed he would answer quickly, because each second felt like the floor beneath her was cracking. When he picked up, she tried to speak, but her voice broke, and Mark immediately asked what happened. She forced herself to explain. Lena, the papers, the storm, the fear clawing at her chest. Mark's tone shifted from casual warmth to sharp focus, telling her to send everything immediately and not speak to Lena under any circumstances. Hearing his confidence steadied her, but only a little. After ending the call, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, listening to Eli quietly play with his hands, unaware of how close their world had come to disaster. Sienna inhaled deeply, reminding herself that this wasn't over, but she wasn't helpless. Not anymore. Minutes later, Sienna scanned every page of the custody filing and sent them to Mark with shaking hands. Each document felt like a trap Lena had spent months carefully designing. As she hit send, a wave of exhaustion crashed through her, but there was no time to sink into it. She looked at Ellie, small, innocent, trusting her completely, and something inside her hardened. She promised herself Lena would not win. Not now, not ever. Footsteps outside made her freeze, but when she peeked through the window, it was only a passing jogger. The paranoia, though, stayed lodged in her chest. She gathered the papers, placed them in a folder, and held it like a shield. The battle had begun, And even though fear crawled through every inch of her, she felt something else rising too. Fire. Sienna awoke before sunrise, her body heavy from a night of twisting thoughts. Every time she closed her eyes, Lena's cold stare returned, followed by the word custody, echoing through her chest like a threat she couldn't outrun. She moved quietly through the house, checking the locks, checking on Eli, checking anything she could because control felt like the only thing she still had. But when she opened the front curtains, her stomach flipped. Lena's car was parked across the street, its dark shape watching, not moving, not leaving, just hovering like a warning. Sienna's breath stuttered as she imagined what story Lena might be preparing now, what lie she would spread next. As Eli padded into the room, rubbing his eyes, Sienna forced a calm smile. Even though her pulse was uneven, she pulled him close and whispered that today would be normal, but deep down she already knew nothing about today would be normal. Not with Lena circling their lives like a storm that refused to pass. The phone buzzed with a message from Mark just as Sienna was pouring cereal for Eli. His words were short, but urgent. Lena made contact with the school. "Call me now." Her stomach dropped. She looked at Eli humming softly to himself at the table, completely unaware that his life was being twisted like a game piece. Sienna stepped into the hallway, heart pounding as she dialed Mark. He explained that Lena had sent an email claiming Sienna was emotionally unstable and needed supervised support. The audacity made Sienna's hands shake. She felt anger rising like heat under her skin, overpowering the fear for a moment. Mark told her he was already preparing a counter-response and gathering evidence, but she needed to document everything. Every message, every appearance, every threat. When she hung up, Sienna wiped her face, forced a deep breath, and returned to the kitchen. Eli looked up at her with an innocent smile that hurt to see, and she knew she had to be stronger than she'd ever been. By mid-morning, Sienna found herself driving toward Eli's school with a tightness in her chest she couldn't shake. She needed to get ahead of Lena's lies before they spread. As she pulled into the parking lot, she saw a cluster of parents talking, glancing at her with curious eyes that felt sharper than usual. Her throat dried. She walked Eli to the entrance, holding his hand a little longer than normal, not ready to let go. The school counselor met her with a polite smile, but Sienna felt the shift. The careful tone, the soft questions, the way she was being assessed. She answered everything calmly, even though inside she was falling apart. The counselor's gaze flickered with something like doubt, something planted by Lena. And when Sienna left the building, she felt the weight of whispers trailing behind her. Lena was moving fast, faster than she expected. Sienna knew she had to move faster. When Sienna returned home, she found a bright yellow envelope taped to her door. Her pulse spiked before she even touched it. The handwriting was Lena's, perfect, sharp, rehearsed. Inside was a printed statement, accusing Sienna of endangering Eli due to emotional instability and urging neighbors to stay alert. Heat flooded Sienna's face. Her hands shook as she read the final line. "I'm doing what's best for Eli." She crushed the paper in her fist, feeling her breath shorten as humiliation battled rage. She imagined Lena dropping the letter off with a satisfied smirk. Sienna forced herself inside, placed the letter on the table, and took a picture of it for evidence. She felt sick, knowing this was still only the beginning, but this moment also lit something inside her. A fire strong enough to burn through the lies. She vowed, out loud, that Lena would not destroy her life. Sienna sat at the dining table again, this time with the yellow letter spread open beside the custody documents. Her phone was on speaker as Mark walked her through the next steps. File a formal complaint, gather timestamps, collect witness statements, stay calm. She listened carefully, but her eyes kept drifting to Eli playing in the corner, building a tiny world with plastic blocks, while his real world teetered on the edge. Mark's voice was steady, grounding her, reminding her she wasn't alone in this fight. She repeated each instruction, writing everything down so she wouldn't forget. When the call finally ended, she placed her head in her hands, letting herself break for just a moment before wiping her tears away. She looked up at Eli and let her determination settle like steel. Lena could twist the world all she wanted, but Sienna would set it straight. Sienna didn't realize her hands were shaking until she heard the rattle of her keys hitting the kitchen counter. Mark had called again, this time with a warning that made her stomach drop. Lena had filed a police report claiming Sienna had emotional outbursts and violent tendencies. The accusation hit like a punch she never saw coming. She stood frozen, the room tilting as fear wrapped around her ribs. Eli peeked in from the living room, sensing something was wrong, and she forced a smile so fragile it felt like it might shatter if she breathed too hard. A knock at the door made her whole body tense, and for a split second she imagined Lena standing there with that cold, confident smirk. But when she opened it, she found 2 officers and Detective Collins, her face serious but steady. Sienna swallowed hard, knowing exactly why they were here. Lena had crossed another line, and now everything was escalating faster than Sienna could brace for. Detective Collins stepped inside with a steady, measured calm that immediately contrasted Lena's chaos. She explained that the report claimed Sienna had yelled at neighbors, slammed doors, and created a hostile environment for Eli. Hearing the lies spoken aloud made Sienna's chest tighten until she could barely breathe. She felt humiliated, angry, violated, but she answered every question clearly, refusing to let panic twist her words. Eli stood close to her, gripping her shirt like a lifeline. When Collins knelt to speak to him gently, Sienna watched every second with her heart clenched. Eli's quiet, honest answers, saying his mom was kind, safe, and never yelled at him, brought tears to her eyes. Collins stood, her expression shifting with subtle understanding. She told Sienna they would investigate properly and to stay calm. But the truth hovered heavy. Lena was willing to drag police into this war, and Sienna feared the worst was still coming. After the officers left, Sienna finally let her legs give out, sinking to the floor as the weight of everything threatened to crush her. For a moment, the house felt too silent, too still, like the calm before something even worse. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to keep herself from unraveling. Eli sat beside her, leaning his head on her shoulder, his presence grounding her in a quiet, gentle way that made her chest ache. Then her phone buzzed again. Another message from Mark, this time forwarding a post Lena had made online. It was a long, dramatic plea about saving Eli from an unstable home, filled with manipulative half-truths and twisted versions of their childhood. Sienna felt anger rise like fire under her skin, burning away the numbness. She knew she had to respond, not publicly, but strategically. The lies were spreading fast, and she couldn't let Lena control the narrative. By evening, Sienna forced herself to start gathering evidence, just as Mark instructed. She opened her laptop, scrolling through old messages and finding patterns she had ignored for years. Lena's jealousy disguised as concern, her subtle digs, her manipulative phrasing. With each screenshot, the truth sharpened. Eli quietly played beside her, humming softly, unaware of the emotional battlefield unfolding in his mother's chest. Then Sienna found something she hadn't seen before, an old voicemail from Lena, angry, frantic, accusing Sienna of stealing the future she deserved. Hearing it again sent a chill through her. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't new. Lena had been building this resentment piece by piece. Sienna saved the file, swallowing the sick realization that her own sister had been planning this long before Eli was even pulled into it. And now, the trap had been sprung. Night fell fast, pulling darkness through the windows like a curtain closing on the day's frantic pace. Sienna finally put Eli to bed, whispering soothing promises she prayed she could keep. When his breathing settled into soft rhythms, she returned to the dining table with a heaviness that made every step feel slow. She opened Lena's voicemail again, letting the message play while she took notes for Mark. The bitterness in Lena's voice twisted deeper with every sentence. Sienna pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by grief, not just for herself, but for what Lena had become. When the message ended, the silence felt even louder. She gathered everything she had collected, screenshots, letters, timestamps, and placed them carefully into a folder. She wasn't just defending herself anymore, she was unraveling the truth behind Lena's obsession. And for the first time, she felt the balance of power begin to shift. Sienna arrived at Mark's office with a folder so thick, it felt like she carried an entire story, carved in pain. She walked inside with determination, but the moment she saw Mark studying the pile of evidence she'd sent the night before, something inside her trembled. He gestured for her to sit, and as she slid into the chair, he spoke with a calm, sharp confidence she desperately needed. He laid out a plan: handwriting analysts to confirm Lena forged signatures, digital experts to trace fake timestamps, character witnesses to counter her lies. With each step he described, Sienna felt pieces of her fear peeling away, replaced by something steadier. She wasn't powerless anymore. She was fighting back with precision. Mark told her this was no longer a simple custody ploy. This was targeted manipulation, and the court needed to see the truth. Sienna nodded, gripping the folder tighter. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt the ground beneath her begin to solidify. After hours of reviewing documents with Mark, Sienna stepped outside for air, only to feel her chest freeze at the sight of Lena leaning against a nearby car. Arms crossed, watching like she owned the sidewalk. Their eyes locked, and the world narrowed to a cold, quiet tension. Lena pushed herself off the car with a slow, deliberate grace, walking toward her with that same unsettling smile she wore the day she showed up with custody papers. She spoke in a soft voice, dripping fake sweetness, accusing Sienna of making things worse, and promising she'd fix everything once Eli was safe. Sienna's hands curled into fists at her sides, her breath shaking as she tried to hold on to Mark's advice not to engage. But Lena stepped closer, lowering her voice into something darker, something poisonous. For a moment, Sienna felt her resolve slip. Then she exhaled, stepped back, and walked away without a word. And Lena's smile cracked. Back at home, Sienna felt her phone buzz again. Detective Collins requesting a meeting. Heart pounding, she invited Collins inside, standing straighter, when she saw the detective's serious expression. Collins explained quietly that the handwriting analysis had already flagged inconsistencies in Lena's documents, and the timestamp investigation was yielding even more red flags. As Collins spoke, Sienna felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief that Lena's lies were unraveling, fear that Lena would lash out harder when she realized she was losing control. Collins asked more questions, occasionally glancing toward Eli, who was drawing quietly on the rug. Sienna answered everything honestly, her voice steadier than she expected. Collins finally nodded, telling her she was doing everything right and that the truth was beginning to lean in her favor. Sienna felt a small spark of hope flicker in her chest. Fragile, but bright. Later that evening, Sienna and Mark worked over a video call, sorting through every piece of evidence Lena had planted. Mark pointed out inconsistencies Sienna had missed. Shifts in Lena's handwriting, mismatched signatures, reused sentences copied from online templates. Sienna's head spun as she realized how carefully Lena had constructed this facade. Eli climbed onto her lap halfway through the call, resting his head against her chest, grounding her in the storm. Mark's voice remained calm but firm, explaining how they would present a complete timeline, proving Lena's forged evidence and false accusations. Sienna nodded, taking notes, each new discovery strengthening her resolve. She understood now that this wasn't just a fight for Eli. It was a fight to protect her truth. And she was ready. Night stretched long and heavy, but Sienna refused to stop until everything was organized. She laid out the evidence on the table, forming a timeline that exposed Lena's manipulation. Every forged signature, every fabricated message, every carefully planned lie. Eli slept on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, his soft breaths reminding her why she couldn't fail. As she gathered the final pieces into a single binder, she felt something inside her shift. This wasn't fear anymore. This was strength born from survival. She straightened her back, closed the binder with a firm snap, and whispered to herself that tomorrow she would hand all of this to Mark and let the truth finally breathe. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows, but this time it didn't shake her. She was ready for whatever Lena tried next. The next morning felt colder than the air outside. Sienna barely slept, yet her mind was sharper than it had been in weeks. She carried her binder into the kitchen, the weight of everything inside pulling at her arms. As she poured a cup of coffee, she felt Eli slip his small hand into hers, silently reminding her why she couldn't break. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again, this time with a video link Mark had sent. Sienna hesitated, then pressed play. The footage showed Lena sneaking around the school parking lot, whispering something to a parent while handing them a folded flyer full of lies. Watching Lena's cold confidence made Sienna's stomach twist. She felt the betrayal in her bones. But beneath it, something stronger rose, a fire that crackled through her chest. Lena had pushed too far, and now the truth was finally turning against her. Sienna straightened her shoulders, ready to finish what Lena started. Sienna drove to the police station with her binder clutched against her chest, her heart beat steady but heavy. Detective Collins met her in the lobby, her face unreadable yet calmer than before. They walked into a private room where Collins laid out new findings: forged email headers, mismatched dates, and evidence Lena had used a VPN to disguise her IP address. Each revelation hit Sienna like a wave. Overwhelming but clarifying. She realized just how far Lena had gone, how deep her obsession had sunk. Collins reassured her that charges for fraud were now being considered, though the process was delicate. Sienna breathed in slow, feeling both fear and vindication tighten her chest. When Collins asked if she was ready to make a full statement, Sienna nodded without hesitation. She finally understood. Telling the truth wasn't just defending herself. It was exposing the storm Lena had spent years building. Hours later, Sienna stepped out of the station feeling drained but lighter, as if truth had finally begun to carve open the lies crushing her. She sat in her car, pulling in steady breaths, when her phone buzzed again. Another message from Mark. This time, it wasn't evidence. It was a warning. Lena had shown up at the courthouse demanding an emergency hearing, claiming Sienna was interfering with family reunification. The audacity nearly made Sienna laugh, but fear crept into her spine. She texted Mark back, agreeing to meet him immediately. As she started the car, she felt the familiar tremble return to her hands. But this time, she didn't let it stop her. She wasn't the same terrified woman Lena ambushed with custody papers. She had proof now. She had allies, and she had the truth. Lena wanted a fight. She was about to get one. Mark ushered Sienna into a small meeting room beside the courthouse, closing the door behind them with a firmness that made her nerves jolt. He explained quickly that Lena claimed Sienna was manipulating the investigation, hoping to twist the narrative before evidence could expose her. But Mark wasn't rattled. He laid out documents already prepared, authenticated timestamps, verified messages, the school footage, everything lined up in airtight order. Sienna watched him flip through the pages with surgical precision, feeling awe and gratitude rise in her chest. For the first time, she saw how strong their case really was. Mark told her the judge might not approve Lena's emergency request, and even if it was approved, they were ready. Sienna nodded, steadying her breath. She could feel the moment approaching, the one where everything Lena had built would finally collapse. As dusk settled over the courthouse, Sienna walked outside with her binder pressed against her chest, a strange calm washing through her. Mark had just informed her the judge denied Lena's emergency request. Lena had lost the round she thought she'd win. Sienna stood on the steps, breathing in the cooling air, letting the victory settle into her bones. She knew this wasn't the end. Lena would come harder, meaner, more desperate. But now the tide was turning. Eli ran up from where he had been waiting with a trusted friend of Mark's, throwing his arms around her waist. Sienna hugged him with a strength she didn't know she had left. The war wasn't over, but for the first time she felt like she could win. And that small spark of hope glowed warm enough to steady every fear inside her. The courthouse hall was colder than Sienna expected. A long, echoing tunnel of polished floors and tense silence. She walked beside Mark, clutching her binder so hard her fingers ached. Every step felt heavier, as if the walls themselves watched her. Today was the day Lena had been pushing toward. The custody hearing that would either save or shatter Sienna's world. As they approached the courtroom doors, Sienna spotted Lena standing with her lawyer, looking impossibly calm, her smile soft and sharp at the same time. The sight of her sent a jolt through Sienna's chest. She felt Eli's small hand slip into hers, grounding her in a way nothing else could. Mark leaned close, whispering that they were ready, that the evidence would speak louder than Lena's lies. Sienna inhaled deeply, forcing her fear to settle. She wasn't walking into this as prey anymore. She was walking in as a mother determined to win. The hearing opened with Lena's attorney taking the floor first. His voice was smooth, practiced, dripping with false concern as he painted Sienna as unstable, overwhelmed, and unfit. Each word felt like a needle, sharp and deliberate. Sienna sat still, forcing herself not to flinch. Lena sat straight back beside her lawyer, hands folded like she was the picture of calm innocence, her eyes glancing at Sienna with quiet triumph. When it was Mark's turn, he rose slowly, placing documents on the table with measured precision. He spoke with a confidence that filled the room, unraveling every lie Lena had spun. Line by line, he broke down the forged emails, the doctored timestamps, the false reports. The judge leaned forward, interest sharpening. Sienna watched Lena's face shift, the cracks forming as the truth pushed through. The balance was changing, turning in Sienna's favor, and Lena could feel it. When Detective Collins took the stand, the entire room shifted. She spoke with a calm precision that sliced straight through Lena's lies. She explained the forged handwriting, the altered timestamps, and the fabricated reports. Every detail hit like a hammer. Sienna watched Lena's hands tighten around her folder, her knuckles paling as Collins continued. Mark guided the testimony with careful questions, letting the truth unfold cleanly and undeniably. The judge scribbled notes, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. Sienna felt breath slowly returning to her lungs, something like hope warming her chest. But beneath it all, she couldn't ignore Lena's stare. Cold, shaking at the edges, filled with something dangerous. Collins finished with a firm statement. The evidence was manipulated intentionally. The room fell silent, the truth hanging heavier than anything Lena had tried to create. Then came the moment Sienna feared most. Lena's testimony. She stepped onto the stand with carefully arranged heartbreak on her face, speaking in a soft, trembling voice designed to earn sympathy. She described Sienna as emotionally unpredictable, claiming she feared for Eli's safety. Her lies unfolded like a rehearsed script. But something was different now. Sienna watched the judge's expression tighten, watched Mark's slight smirk grow, watched the courtroom lean back as Lena's performance cracked at the seams. Under cross-examination, Mark confronted her with the evidence, screenshots, timestamps, and her own contradictions. Lena stumbled, her voice rising, her face flushing red as her calm mask shattered. She insisted she was protecting Eli, but her words tangled into panic. The truth was breaking through her perfectly constructed illusion, and everyone saw it. The final blow came when Mark presented the voicemail, the one where Lena accused Sienna of stealing her future. The courtroom fell so silent, Sienna could hear her own heartbeat. As Lena's voice filled the room, angry, frantic, unhinged, the last piece of her facade shattered. Lena's face drained of color, her lips trembling as she realized her own words had betrayed her. The judge leaned back, folding his hands, the decision already taking shape in his expression. Sienna felt something inside her loosen, something heavy, finally letting go. When the judge announced the hearing would conclude and his ruling would come in the morning, Lena shot Sienna a look filled with wounded rage and desperation. But Sienna didn't shrink this time. She held her ground. She had survived the storm. Now the truth would decide the rest. Sienna barely slept, lying awake with every breath tight in her chest as she waited for morning to come. When the phone finally buzzed, she froze before answering. Mark's voice came calm, steady, almost gentle as he told her the ruling had been issued. Her heart hammered as she listened, clutching the edge of the counter until her fingers ached. And then she heard the words she never expected to hear, spoken. So simply, full custody restored, all allegations dismissed, investigation into Lena officially open. For a moment, the world tilted, her breath collapsing in a burst of relief so sharp it hurt. She pressed a hand over her mouth, shaking as tears streamed freely. Eli wandered in, rubbing his eyes, and she scooped him into her arms with a sob she couldn't hold back. After everything, every lie, every threat, every moment she wondered if she was strong enough. They had won, but the war's final blow had yet to land. Lena hadn't seen the ruling, and Sienna knew that moment would change everything. Later that morning, Sienna arrived at the courthouse to collect the official documents. She stepped inside with her shoulders straighter, her breath steadier. Mark greeted her with a proud smile, handing her the envelope containing the judge-signed ruling. Holding it felt like gripping a new beginning. Solid, undeniable, hers. But as they stepped into the hallway, a sharp voice cut through the air. Lena stormed toward them, eyes wild, face blotched with fury. She had just read the ruling, and the truth hit her like a blow she couldn't absorb. She accused Sienna of sabotaging her life, screamed that the system was corrupt, that everyone was blind. Sienna stood still, the envelope tucked against her chest, her fear replaced by something calmer. Finality. Mark stepped between them, commanding Lena to back away. The hallway filled with echoes of a sister's rage and a mother's quiet victory. And for the first time, Lena looked small. Security arrived fast, stepping between Lena and Sienna before the argument could spiral further. Lena's voice cracked as she begged them to listen, insisting she was the victim, grasping at any thread of control left in her hands. But the officers, already briefed by Collins, kept their distance firm and professional. Sienna felt Mark's steady presence beside her, reminding her she didn't have to fight anymore. The truth was fighting for her now. Then Detective Collins entered, her calm presence dissolving the tension with quiet authority. She informed Lena the investigation into her forged evidence had officially begun, and that she would be contacted for questioning. Lena's knees seemed to buckle, her fury collapsing into disbelief. Sienna watched with a hollow ache. This was her sister, unraveling in the consequences she created. And yet, there was no joy, only a heavy sadness for what Lena had become. The moment marked an ending Sienna never wanted, but desperately needed. When Sienna finally stepped outside the courthouse, the sunlight felt different, warmer, softer, like the world had shifted by a few degrees. Eli ran to her from where Carla waited, flinging his arms around her waist with a happiness she hadn't seen in weeks. She knelt down, holding him tight, breathing in the simple, sweet smell of safety. Carla hugged her, tears of relief in her eyes, and Sienna felt gratitude swell deep in her chest. She looked back at the courthouse doors, knowing Lena was still inside, facing a future built on the ashes of her own actions. Sienna didn't feel triumphant, she felt free, but heavy with the scars the battle had carved into her. Yet as she lifted Eli into her arms, she realized something important. This story no longer belonged to fear, it belonged to healing. And they were finally standing at the starting line. That evening, the house felt different, lighter, quieter, no longer holding its breath. Sienna stood in Eli's doorway, watching him sleep, his small chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Her eyes softened as she whispered a thank you to whatever strength carried them this far. She walked to the dining table and opened the binder one last time, running her fingertips over the pages that had nearly torn her life apart. Instead of fear, she felt pride. She fought. She protected her son. She placed the binder in a box, sealing it shut, symbolizing the end of a war she never asked for. Then she stepped outside with a blanket around her shoulders. Looking up at the night sky, the air felt new. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, she and Eli would wake up without fear, without threats, without Lena's shadow smothering their every move. For the first time in a long time, Sienna allowed herself to dream again.